the Article 4 on the ADU bylaw. So just kind of run of the show for this evening, I will go through a PowerPoint presentation. I'll bring up on each slide, I'll have the article and the motion. We'll just talk through very briefly what each of the motions is. And then I will open it up for questions from members of the audience here. This is a hearing. This is not meant to be a debate on the merits of the article. So it's really just a question and answer. If you have questions, we will endeavor to answer the questions that you have. And if not, we'll take note of those and have them available should the questions be raised on the floor of town meeting. I'm joined this evening by Rich Muti, who is the chair of the select board, and Patty Mahalich, who is our going to help us run the Zoom. So this is a webinar. If you are interested in speaking, you just need to raise your hand and then Patty will bring you into the meeting, and you can also use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen here that we can use to answer questions. And I will answer them verbally. I will not type answers into the Q&A. So with that, unless there's any other questions before we get started, I did want to mention that for several of these articles, there are proponents here who I will just let give a brief statement. And then if you have questions on those articles, you can direct them to the proponents, and we'll bring those people in to the main session of the Zoom here when we get to those articles. So with that, I will share my screen and we can go ahead and get started. Okay. So as I said, this is the town manager's hearing on the articles for the fall town meeting. Town meeting starts on Thursday, November 10th at 7 p.m. in the Winchester High School. Article 1 is a majority vote. This is a standard article we have each year that allows reports of town officers, boards, committees, including the finance committee, to be received and filed. And the proponent of this is the select board. I'm going to assume for the articles that are standard that folks won't have questions, this being one of them, but please, if you do have questions, you want to jump in at any time, please just raise your hand or throw a question in the Q&A. Thank you. Okay, Article 2. Article 2 is a majority vote. This article is on the consent agenda and is being indefinitely postponed. This is a standard article that we have each year, which talks about the need to declare vacancies in the seats of town meeting members for failure to attend one half or more of the total number of sessions in the Winchester town meeting held in the previous 12-month period. I just wanted to mention there was a typo in the motion book. It was correct in the warrant that was mailed out, but there was a typo in the motion book that referenced the wrong fall and spring town meeting dates. So as you can see here, the dates we're talking about are fall 2021 and spring 2022. Article 3 is a majority vote. And this is a standard article we have each year for the town to hear and act on the report of the planning board. And the proponent of this is the planning. Article 4. So this is where we start getting into kind of the meat of things. Article 4 is a majority vote. This article is co-sponsored by the Planning Board, the Select Board, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the Housing Partnership Board. This is an article to amend the zoning section 3.2.2 and section 10 of the town's zoning bylaw to allow the creation of accessory dwelling units. As I mentioned, this article was subject to a prior town hearing, public hearing with the Planning Board on October 11th. So as such, we will not be discussing it in detail this evening. But if you do have questions, you can refer them to the town clerk or to our town planner, Brian Zakelli, or to me through the town manager's office at townmanager@winchester.us. I see Pamela Court has her hand raised, so I don't know, Patty, if you want to bring her in. Can you speak, Pamela? I'm not sure. I can't see. With sharing the screen, I lose a little bit of the accessibility in terms of seeing what everybody else is doing.
I don't think she's in yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patty, can you bring Pamela in? Okay, not sure what's going on here. Maybe Pamela, if you want to put your question in the Q&A and we can come back to this. Oh, there you are.
Hi, I was in the middle of typing my question.
Oh, it's no worries.
Is the recording for that October 11th public hearing by the planning board readily available now?
I don't have the answer to that question, but I can certainly get the answer to that.
And I'm curious if there could be links to these public hearings that pertain to town meeting, if links to those recordings could be included on the town meeting, the official town meeting website. I don't know, that may be a big ask if y'all are very busy, but
Yeah, I can certainly look at that. Typically, I believe the planning board meetings are available on the WinCam website, but we can certainly look about adding a link there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just making a note here so I don't forget. Okay. The next article, Article 5. This again it's another citizen's petition brought forward by Richard Rohan. And under this article, the town would accept sections 3 to 7, inclusive of Chapter 44B of the General Laws, otherwise known as the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act, by approving a surcharge on real property for the purposes permitted by said act, including the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources, the acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of land for recreational uses, the acquisition, creation, preservation, and support of community housing, and the rehabilitation of and restoration of such open space and community housing that is acquired or created as provided under said act. In this case, the request is to levy a surcharge on real property of 1.5% of the annual real estate tax against real property commencing in fiscal year 2024. And then there's a series of exemptions that are proposed for acceptance. Given that this is a citizen petition, I would like to invite the proponent of this, Richard Rohan, to join as a panelist. And Richard, you're welcome to make a brief statement, and then I'll open the floor for questions. Sounds like Patty's having a little technical difficulty here, so I'm trying to communicate with her to bring people into the meeting. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Beth. Basically, this article is asking town meeting to place before the voters in the next municipal election in March of 2023, asking the voters whether or not to adopt the so-called Community Preservation Act. And we'd be asking for, in the motion language, an imposition of a 1.5% surcharge on real property, real estate taxes. And that surcharge would be subject to a couple of different exemptions, one of which is the exemption of the first $100,000 of assessed value on all properties, commercial, residential, and industrial. And also an exemption for low income households. So households that are headed by individuals making less than 80% of the of the area median income could file for an exemption, the total exemption from the surcharge, as well as senior households 62 years or older, earning up to 100% of AMI. There's further background. You're muted, Beth.
Yes, thanks. Did you have anything further that you wanted to add?
No, just that there's extensive background information in the warrant booklet that came out today. So
Great.
see if there's any
Okay.
other questions from the audience tonight.
Yeah, please, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can put your question in the chat. Or the Q&A, sorry. Okay, I don't see anything coming up. I'll just give it another minute. Go ahead, Pamela. I think you're still in the meeting, so you can go ahead and talk. Just unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Rich, I was wondering if we could find out how much estimated money based on the most recent state matching percentages, how much it would be estimated we would get in state matching funds if we had adopted the Community Preservation Act on perhaps this booklet of warrant articles and all of the projects involved in here, because I understand that affordable housing and fields and a number of other things would be covered by that. I'd be curious how much money Winchester would be getting from the state. If there's any way that you could provide that data so that we could see it at town meeting, that would be excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, I can, and I have it. I have it here on my computer, but I can tell you that the Community Preservation Coalition has worked through those numbers for the town, and their estimates are that at a 1.5% surcharge, with all of the exemptions that I stated, that the amount last year would have been somewhere in the range of $1.5 million. And then in November, the state distributes the matching funds. So the state is getting ready to distribute the matching funds for the previous fiscal year. We've been told that those matching funds would be about 35% for last year. So 35% of 1.5 million is another $500,000. So again, the Community Preservation Coalition's estimates are that had this been in effect for the last year in Winchester, that it would be about $2 million.
Great, thank you. Any follow-up question, Pamela?
No, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So there's a couple questions in the Q&A that I'll run through. First is from Chris Nixon. The question is, has the select board taken a position on this? And the board has not yet taken a position, although I expect this to be one of the items they discuss at their meeting on Monday, November 7th. And the next question is from Quinn Simpson. What is the 1.5% of assessed value, 1.5% in increase in current property tax rate, et cetera?
So for the average Winchester household, it would be about $218. So 1.5% surcharge on a property of estimated assessed value of about 1.2 million works out to be about $218 a year. If that's
great, thank you. Patty, if you could bring Chris Nixon in, I see he has his hand raised.
Thank you, Patty. Hi, Beth. And thanks for your presentation, Rich. I'm curious to know, just as a follow-up to some of the other presentations you've had over the past couple of weeks, have you yet been able to determine from your sources, could the funds that are required to be either expended or encumbered each year, there are, they go to certain classifications of projects, which you've previously described, including affordable housing, open space, and so forth. Have you been able to determine yet if funds could be basically transferred to capital and be encumbered so that they could only be spent on certain eligible projects that meet the criteria of the CPA? Or is that maybe sort of a work in progress and you feel like you'll have that before town meeting?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Chris. And I know that was a question that you had when we met previously with the Fields Management Committee. And we've not determined the exact answer to that, although my guess is that it may not be possible, unfortunately, to do that, to encumber those funds for the purposes of capital. They can, however, be transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust because their purposes are pretty much aligned with the purposes of the CPA. Similarly, the Conservation Commission, if it so chooses, could set up a similar type of fund to the Affordable Housing Trust, in which they could receive money from the CPA. But we've not seen anything in our research that says that, I mean, where a town or a city has done that for a capital or even for historical properties.
And so I appreciate that. Is there, this may almost be more of a question for Ms. Rudolph. Is there an authority having jurisdiction on this that, you know, we could reach out to as we try to contemplate if town meeting supported this and we move forward, trying to understand how those funds are dispersed, how they're encumbered, how this actually plays out for Winchester, given we have a capital planning committee, many other communities don't. Is there some authority having jurisdiction we could reach out to and ask the question?
So there is this capital planning, name is escaping me. It's like a
Coalition.
quasi-government coalition. Thank you. Yes. That is a resource on questions related to the capital, related to the CPA. So I think we could direct a question to them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any further questions on the CPA item? Okay, thank you very much, Richard. I
You're
will
welcome.
move on.
Thank you very much, Beth.
You're welcome. I will move on to Article 6. Article 6 is a majority vote. This is another citizens petition brought forward by Rachel Whitehouse. This article seeks to add a new section, chapter 25, to the town's code of bylaws regarding leaf blowers. The purpose of the bylaw is to establish reasonable limitations on the use of gas leaf blowers in the town in order to lessen the impact of gas leaf blowers' adverse effects on health, welfare, and the environment. The limitations are outlined in section 4, which encourages the use of electric leaf blowers, allows that use year round, and then limits the use of gas leaf blowers. And Rachel, I'll let you, similar to Rich, make a statement if you'd like regarding this, regarding the proposed bylaw.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Ken, yes.
Oh, hello. Hi. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Rich, for having us tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to say a few things here. So in this bylaw, we're really representing dozens and dozens of residents who have expressed their frustration with the noise of gas leaf blowers, which also emit highly toxic fumes. And at some point, everybody has to acknowledge that this is hurting our residents, children, and workers, and that there's a quiet and clean alternative in electric leaf blowers, and that many Metro Boston towns are moving in this direction, including many of Winchester's closest neighbors. So this bylaw, we believe, is a balanced approach. It's simple. It's designed specifically for Winchester to provide a quieter and cleaner town for our residents and our children, and it's fair and respectful to our landscapers.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So I will open, so sorry, Rachel.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry. I'll open the floor to any town meeting members who may have questions, or you can put your questions in Q&A. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Pamela.
Hi, thank you. I apologize for this being nitpicky, but I was just curious where within the language where you're defining leaf blowers and electric versus gas powered, it would something like a leaf vacuum fall, which is more like it's like a lawnmower, but it sucks the leaves and the branches up, and they're usually gas powered. Is that something that you're just not worried about because it's not used enough, or something that would fall within there?
So this bylaw only addresses leaf blowers. So if it's not blowing leaves, then it wouldn't be impacted. There's lots of other landscaping equipment that uses gas, and this bylaw does not address them.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pam.
Any further question on this article? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 7. Article 7 is a standard article to vote and hear upon the report of the Capital Planning Committee. The proponent of the article is the Capital Planning Committee. Article 8. So Article 8 is the motions brought forward by the Capital Planning Committee. There are 12 motions under Article 8. So I have 2 pages of, actually, excuse me, 3 pages of motions listed here. So what I'm gonna do is go through motions 1 through 5 that are on this first screen here and see if people have questions. And then I'll move to the second page and so forth.
What I like is that he didn't ask too many questions
Whoever is speaking, could you please mute
that
yourself?
forced us to tip our hands on answers.
Can whoever's speaking, please mute yourself?
George, can you mute yourself? Patty, maybe push them out. Thanks.
Sorry, Patty is having some technical difficulties, so I'm texting her to let her know who to bring in. She's not able to hear or see the meeting at this time, so we're making it work here. So Roger McPeak is here. He's the chair of the Capital Planning Committee. He'll come in just a minute if there's any questions on any of these articles as well. So I'll just move through I'll read through the first 5 motions here, and then we can open the floor to questions. So motion 1 is for the town to appropriate $150,000 from the Building Stabilization Fund for the schematic package for roof design and replacement engineering. In particular, this project is looking at the Ambrose roof, a portion of the McCall School roof, town hall and library roofs, which are both slate roofs. Motion 2 is for the town to appropriate $500,000 from the Building Stabilization Funds for the town hall fire alarm project, including construction and engineering. Motion 3 is for the town to appropriate $825,000 from the Building Stabilization Funds for masonry repairs to the McCall School building, including construction and engineering. Motion 4 is for the town to appropriate $186,000 from the Building Stabilization Funds for the McCall School control conversion completion, including construction and engineering. And motion 5 is for the town to appropriate $118,170 from the Capital Stabilization Fund for the purchase of a new sidewalk plow for DPW. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions that folks have on those first 5 motions. Pamela, I'm not sure if you have your hand raised for this article or.
Sorry, I forgot to lower it. My
No
apologies.
worries. Okay, seeing no questions, I'll move on to the next group. So this is motions 6 through 10. The first motion 6 is for the town to appropriate $140,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund for repairs to the Cross Street Bridge, including construction and engineering. Motion 7 is for the town to appropriate $250,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund for repairs to the Washington Street Bridge, including construction and engineering. Motion 8 is for the town to appropriate $70,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund for repairs to the Ambrose School fire sprinkler system, including construction and engineering. Motion 9 is for the town to appropriate $250,000 from the Capital Stabilization Fund for installation of median islands along Highland Avenue, including engineering and construction. This is related to a traffic calming project. And motion 10 is for the town to appropriate $150,000 from the capital stabilization fund for the installation of a rapid rectangular flashing beacon and curb extensions at Leonard Field. And this is for construction engineering. And for those who may not know what the acronym RRFB is, it's the flashing lights that you see around town that we've installed at a variety of crosswalks, which are pedestrian activated. So folks push the button, the lights come on and flash as people are crossing through the crosswalk. So with that, I take any questions on motions 6 through 10. Go ahead, Pamela.
Would it be possible to get a list of any kind of recordings or minutes of meetings where the medians for Highland Avenue were discussed? Whether that's
Sure.
whether that's TTAC or select board or planning board, or just, I know that those are available, and maybe I can work with Mary Ellen on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sorry
Go
about
ahead.
the only thing I would say there is, correct me if I'm wrong, about the project's been going on for 4 years at this point. So Pamela,
Yeah.
do you want all 4 years worth or just this year or?
Just, I'm sorry, Rich, thanks for clarifying. Yes, just this year. Just this year.
Sure. The select board had a public hearing in the end of June. So those minutes are certainly available. And then the TTAC has discussed it on 2 or 3 occasions over the past few months. So I'm not sure if they were up to date with their minutes, but I can certainly check with those.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions on motions 6 through 10? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to the last 2 motions under Article 8. Motion 11 is for the town to appropriate $220,000 from the water and sewer retained earnings for Nelson Street / Winchester High School drainage improvements, including engineering and construction. And motion 12 is for the town to appropriate $60,000 from the water and sewer retained earnings for Winter Pond water quality improvements, including construction and engineering. Happy to take any questions on those 2 projects. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 9. Article 9 is another article that's brought forward by the Capital Planning Committee. And Article 9 is to vote that the town moved and seconded that the vote of the town passed under Article 13 at the 2019 Fall Town Meeting be amended to increase the amount of the appropriation and borrowing authorization for the Lake Street Bridge replacement project from 1.5 million to 1.2 million. And this is, again, just increasing the borrowing authorization for that project. Any questions on this article? Okay. Seeing none, move on to Article 10. Article 10 is the final article that's brought forward by the Capital Planning Committee. This is a 2/3 vote. And this article is to appropriate $600,500 to pay the cost of purchasing a Vector truck for the water and sewer department. This is a truck commonly used by the town that we often have to, or we always have to either borrow from another community or pay to have a contractor come in when we need to use the vehicle. So this it would be purchasing our own Vector truck. Any questions on this article? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Article 11. Article 11 is brought forward by the town's Communications Study Committee. This article is recommending that the select board and town manager prepare an initial town communication plan. And the plan should very briefly describe the purpose and goals, audiences, information, interests, and communication channels, tasks, rules, and responsibilities, schedule, budget, and evaluation matrix. This, as I mentioned, this article is brought forward by the Communication Study Committee, which was a committee created by town meeting last fall. We've been working over the past year. And Lance Gernsback is here on behalf of the Communication Study Committee. Lance, you're welcome to make a few comments if you'd like.
Good evening. Thank you, Beth. This article is intended as a bridge between the recommendations of the study committee and implementation of these recommendations. The study committee's charge was to look at the issues and set policy and program direction, but it's not our charge to actually implement that. And we know that there are some of the recommendations will be straightforward to implement. Others will require some time and effort. So this is an opportunity to basically get a sense of the town meeting as to how important they think these actions are, but also to give the select board and the town manager an opportunity to look into the feasibility of implementing these. We would expect that the town select board and town manager might come back to town meeting and say, 10 of these recommendations are fairly easy to do and others are more difficult. We'll need either more time or funding or other actions. So this is basically a bridge between the recommendations and an opportunity to explore their feasibility.
Great. Thank you, Lance. I'll open the floor to any questions that folks may have. Okay, not seeing any. We will move on to Article 12. Article 12 is a motion brought forward by the EFPBC and the school committee. Article 12 would amend the vote of town passed under Article 9 at the 2020 Springtown meeting to expand the scope of the purposes of the appropriation and borrowing authorization to include paying costs of planning and designing of a new Lynch school project, in addition to paying costs of feasibility study, and to delete language regarding the allocation of premium received upon the sale of bond notes or other that is no longer necessary or consistent with state law, such that said amendment, and there's language here to show what the revised language is. So Article 12 is basically, this was a borrowing authorization previously approved by town meeting for the feasibility study for the Lynch school. The feasibility study wrapped up earlier this year, and so there's approximately $522,000 that remains in that. And so this this vote will allow the EFPBC and school committee to move forward with that remaining funds immediately to continue with the design of the Lynch school project. So Article 12 and Article 13 are both brought forward by the EFPBC and school committee. I'll just mention both of those and then I'll turn it over to Chris Nixon from the school committee if he wants to make any comments on both of these articles, and then we'll take comments on both at one time. So Article 13 is the article associated with the payment or the appropriation for the Lynch school renovation project, authorizing $94,525,933. This would be subject to a debt exclusion override, which will be held on January 7th of 2023. And Chris, I'll hand it over to you to give the details of that and add anything you'd like to add to Article 12.
Sure. And as I start talking here, if you wouldn't mind, if you could elevate Jay Nardone, I think he's in the audience as well.
Sure. Yep.
Given what questions may come. So first of all, let me put in a plug. Beth, if you are you able to bring up the Lynch website? Am I able to do that sort of as a graphic for people?
I should be able to. Let me just stop my share here. I'll open that up.
If you go to lynch2025.com, which I would encourage all town meeting members to do, you can learn a lot about kind of where we are in this process. The feasibility study that Beth just mentioned, which is pertinent to Article 12, we actually submitted all the documents to the MSBA at the end of August. They spent about a little over, a few weeks really reviewing that submittal. And we're thrilled to share that just last week on October 26th, the executive board at the MSBA voted unanimously to approve our project scope and budget agreement, which basically is a partnership with us to move forward on the Lynch project. The feasibility study is an early conceptual stage of the project. As Beth mentioned, in the spring of 20, town meeting approved $1.5 million for feasibility. That was a very conservative number on our part. We spent well short of that. So those dollars are still technically available. And the MSBA is aware of, and they are approving of us seeking permission from town meeting to basically take those dollars and keep the project moving. If Article 12 passes, that $522,000 that's available will not increase the project cost by that amount. It simply allows us to use the money that's sitting there now to keep the project going into the early stages of design development, and for our project team to continue to have conversations with the various authorities having jurisdiction on the project. If Article 12 should fail, then it means our hands are sort of tied, presuming Article 13 passes, and then we have to wait for the debt exclusion to pass in January. That's really what happened with the Vincent Owen back in 2010, when we completed the feasibility study. Everybody kind of sat on their hands for a while until town meeting acted and the debt exclusion passed in January. So it just means really nothing's happening. And we certainly would like to keep the design work moving. It's one of the few things we can control on this project is schedule. So that's really, I guess, the quick summary of Article 12. But Article 13, and Beth, if you don't mind, if you could go to the cost page that you see there on the pull down, go up to home and you should find a pull down for cost. There is a cost page that I think a lot of town meeting
Hidden
members.
under my pictures, my Zoom
There you
screen
go.
on the side, yeah.
You got it. No, you got it. So I think this is an important page for town meeting members to become familiar with. So the language that you see in Article 13 that references a $94.5 million project, that language is specifically required by the MSBA. That references what we call our overall project budget. You see that down there sort of on the right. That's the construction cost for the new building, which we estimate is a little over 65 million. But of course, we have to abate the existing Lynch, take it down. That's worth 2.3. We're putting $500,000 of improvements into Parkhurst. We're going to spend about $5 million on some temporary swing space at Parkhurst. And we have millions in owners and construction contingencies, design management fees, and so forth. So this all contributes to a considerably higher project budget. However, and it's not really explicitly mentioned in Article 13 because for some reason the MSBA doesn't like us to do it. That project scope and budget agreement that was just voted on October 26th includes a MSBA reimbursement of around $17.5 million. We received about a $10 million facilities grant from the MSBA on the Vincent Owen project. We received about $44 million on Winchester High School, and we're expecting to receive over $17 million on the Lynch project. So the way that actually works is once the project starts, we begin submitting invoices to the MSBA, and within a couple of weeks, they process them and they start sending us a share of that, a reimbursement, a partial reimbursement, if you will. And so the consequence is we never wind up borrowing the full project budget. We'll borrow far less because by the end of the job, we will have received over $17 million from the MSBA. So I guess two important points, Beth, to make is, I mean, if you literally scroll down, I think further on the page, there's a section there about, what is the cost to taxpayers. So the select board and management have done some modeling. The modeling you see here is based on a 30-year bond at what would be our net cost if we spent every nickel on the project. There's still some decisions to be made on the part of the select board around bonding term and whether they want to borrow everything at once or do they want to borrow in tranches. And so a little bit of variability here, but it's important for town meeting members to understand that this cost model is based on us actually having to permanently bond our net cost, which is going to be around $77 million. And that's only if we spend every dollar on the project. And we hope, of course, to spend far less than that. So it can be a little confusing when you see the language on the warrant that references 94.5, but that's the way the MSBA always makes us do it. We have to seek permission to borrow the full amount, even though they turn around and give us a bunch of money. So we don't actually have to. So hopefully that's clear. This is a very standard article. town meeting saw something very similar for Winchester High School, as well as for the Vincent Owen project back in 2010.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. We'll open the floor to any questions from folks at this point. On either Article 12 or Article 13. Okay, looks like we don't see anybody raising their hand, so I will jump back into the presentation. And we will move forward to Article 14. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jay, for your time this evening.
You bet. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. So Article 14, this is the first of several articles brought forward by the Select Board. This article requires a 2/3 vote and is a follow-up to discussions that have happened over the past several town meetings, including last fall, where the town was given authorization to take the property at the corner of Washington Swan Street by eminent domain. The town did take that property last December, and we did issue an RFP for redevelopment of that property earlier this year. And so the Select Board has voted to move forward to enter into a land disposition agreement with Melanson Development Group. So this Article 14 would authorize the Select Board to sell the property, the piece of land at the corner of Washington Swan Street, and it would authorize the Select Board to enter into a land disposition agreement for such sale, said agreement being substantially in the form available on the town's website prior to town meeting. So if you go under the town, onto the town's website, under town meeting, under fall town meeting, there is an exhibit to a letter that was sent out via email last week, and is also included in the packet that you'll be getting delivered to your home with a motion book that includes that LDA that the Select Board has previously voted on. So I'm happy to take any questions on this article. Folks have them. Okay, not seeing any there. We will move forward to Article 15. Oh, I see one question came up in the Q&A here. This is from Heather. Oh, thank you, Heather. So Heather Van Mering, our town meeting moderator, I just wanted to mention, and thank you, Heather, for reminding me that Article 14 and Article 15 will be taken out of order, and it will be heard on the second night of town meeting. I believe it will be the first order of business on the second night of town meeting, due to some prior commitments of Select Board members. Okay, Article 15. Article 15 is again brought forward by the Select Board and requires a majority vote. Under this article, the town would vote to increase the FY23 principal unfunded debt budget appropriated the spring 22 town meeting by $1.22 million, which would be funded by reducing the FY23 health insurance budget by the same amount. This article is brought forward because the town is unable to use our ARPA funds directly to pay the debt service for the Washington Swan Street property. The difference between the purchase price from Melanson, and which is $4.05 million, and what the town paid for the property, which is $5.27 million, is the 1.22 number. And the town is looking to make up that difference. So under this article, we would be appropriating money or moving money into the principal unfunded debt budget. And when the town has issued a ban for that full $5.22 million in March of 22, that is a 12-month ban that will become due in March of 23. And we will pay down that amount by $1.22 million in March of 2023 when that ban comes due. And then we will reissue a new ban for that lower amount of $4.05 million. And then the Select Board would vote to use $1.22 million from the ARPA funds to pay the FY23 health insurance premiums. With that, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that folks may have on this article. Okay. Moving forward to Article 16. Article 16 authorizes the select board to amend the terms of a certain lease by and between the town and the trustees of the Winchester Museum Trust for the lease of certain property located on Shore Road on which the Griffin Museum of Photography is located. Said amendment would allow the use of certain funds and certain endowed funds for improvement to said museum. So this is the lease that the town has with the Griffin Museum. When the town entered into the ground lease in the early 1990s, the museum was required to have an endowment fund of not less than $200,000. Under this article, town meeting would authorize the select board to amend the terms of that lease to allow them to use those endowed funds for improvements to the museum. I'm happy to take any questions on this article. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 17. Article 17 is a consent agenda item. And this would, under this article, the town would appropriate $5,123.80 from the Transportation Network Receipts Fund to partially fund the RFB curb extension project at Leonard Field. This is a standard article we have every year. This money comes to the town from the Transportation Network Company Division of the Department Utilities. The assessment is based on the number of rides from previous calendar year that originated in the cities and towns across the state at 20 cents per ride. So this is money that the town gets from ride sharing programs, and then we are able to appropriate it for a variety of uses, which in this case, we're putting it towards the RFB project that is proposed to be funded under Article 8 on the Capital Planning Committee. Any questions on this one? Okay, moving forward to Article 18. Article 18 is a majority vote. Again, this is a motion brought forward by the select board. And under this, the town would vote to appropriate $38,497.12 to be expended in accordance with the Massachusetts State Subdivision for statewide opioid settlement funds in order to supplement and strengthen resources available to communities and families for substance use disorder, prevention, harm, reduction, treatment, and recovery, and to meet this appropriation, the same amount be funded by miscellaneous non-recurring general fund revenue. So this is a new article to the town, but we will be one that you see going forward. In July of 2021, the Massachusetts Attorney General announced the state's participation in a $26 billion nationwide resolution with opioid distributors. And as part of that, there's approximately $525 million that will be coming into Massachusetts. And of that, 40% is going directly to local communities. Winchester is expected to receive a total of $540,384 over the next, well, between now and 2038. And so this is the first distribution that the town has gotten. The way the state regulations are currently set up, that the funds are being deposited directly into the general fund and require appropriation by town meeting so that the funds can be used by the town for the stated purposes. Happy to take any questions. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 19. Article 19 is brought forward by the select board. It is a consent agenda item. This is a standard article that you see from time to time on the town meeting warrant. And that under this article, the town would rescind the portion of the borrowing authorization identified below that have not been used and are no longer needed in the amounts identified. So in this case, we're rescinding a borrowing authorization for $12,900. In the background of this is basically that when authorizations to borrow are approved, they are typically authorized for an estimated amount of a project, and oftentimes those projects may come in below the estimated amount, or may get a grant for those projects. So this just rescinds the amount of the borrowing that we don't need to use. Any questions on this one? Okay, Article 20. Article 20 is moved and second that the town vote to appropriate $275,000 from free cash to the healthcare and health insurance stabilization fund that was created at spring 2022 town meeting. So in this case, as you may recall, last spring we did create this new stabilization fund. And the purpose of the fund was to set aside reserves to offset unseen increases in employee healthcare expenses. We are proposing to move this $275,000 from free cash into that account, which is the same amount that was remaining in the town's FY22 health insurance budget at the end of the last fiscal year. Any questions on this one? Okay, next article, Article 21. Article 21 is a consent agenda item. And under this article, the town would vote to appropriate $75,000 from free cash to supplement the Eversource account for the purposes of engineering and other consulting services regarding the location and construction of the Eversource 345 kV electronic transmission line in Winchester. This is a standard article that you've seen in a few of the past town meetings. We have a memorandum of understanding with Eversource whereby they are reimbursing the town for field engineering services associated with the oversight of the 345 kV project installation. And in this case, it's a reimbursement. So the town has to have money up front to pay the consultant, then we are reimbursed by Eversource. Any questions on this article? Okay, moving forward. Article 22. Under this article, the town would appropriate $1.35 million to pay for the cost of constructing a water pumping station to increase water pressure and flow for the Arbor Lane and Wendell Street area, including the payment of costs related to the design, engineering, original equipment for pumping station, pipeline connection, and all other costs incidental and related thereto. So a little bit of background on this. The town had an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Woburn dating back to the early 90s, and prior to that was practice, although not formalized in an intermunicipal agreement, to supply approximately 38 houses in the Arbor Lane and Wendell Street neighborhood with water from the city of Woburn because Winchester was unable to provide adequate pressure to those houses. Last fall, with the new PFAS regulations that came into place, we were notified that the city of Woburn had an exceedance of those state issued PFAS contamination levels. And so those residents that were on Winchester water, we very quickly moved to remove them from that were on Woburn water. We quickly moved to remove them from the Woburn system, put them on the Winchester system. And we've worked over the past few months to install a temporary pump station so that they have adequate water pressure. That temporary station has an expected life expectancy of 18 to 24 months. So this appropriation would pay for the design and construction of a final pumping station to support the adequate water supply and water pressure to those homes. I see one question in the chat. Article 22, is this something ARPA funds can be used for? So the select board did actually allocate approximately $230,000 towards the installation of ARPA funds towards the installation of the temporary station. And although this is something that the town would be eligible for ARPA funds, the decision has been made to move forward with going to town meeting and having it being a borrowing authorization, with the debt service would be paid out of the water and sewer enterprise funds, of which a portion gets moved over to the real estate tax under Chapter 110. Any further questions on this article? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Article 23. Article 23 is the first of the articles brought forward by the Finance Committee. Article 23 is a consent agenda item, and it has 5 motions underneath it. So I will just read through those motions. We have the chair of the Finance Committee here as well, in case there are questions regarding this article or any of the other articles brought forward by the Finance Committee. So under motion 1, $17,000 would be appropriated to increase the FY23 town clerk personal services budget. Under motion 2, $19,000 would be voted to increase the FY23 town clerk's expense budget. Those two items are associated with the cost for the January 7th special election. Under motion 3, $25,000 would be voted to increase the FY23 reserve fund account. So typically, as FinCom has asked for reserve fund requests by departments at fall and springtime meeting, they'll seek an appropriation to be made whole of any money that they've given out from the reserve funds before those times. Motion 4 is to reduce the FY23 principal unfunded debt budget appropriated at the Springtown meeting by $200,000 by reducing the funding from the property tax levy in the amount of $140,000, $144.50, and by reducing funding from the building stabilization fund by $11,400, and by reducing funding from the capital stabilization fund by $44,550. And then motion 5 is to decrease the FY23 funded debt interest budget appropriated at Springtown meeting by $189,046 by decreasing funding from the property tax levy in the amount of $210,550 by increasing funding from the building stabilization fund by $4,651 and by increasing the funding from the capital station fund by $16,853. And motions 4 and 5 are related to the debt budget that was approved at the spring 22 town meeting. That budget included estimated payments for various projects. Motions 4 and 5 are adjustments to those based on the actual numbers. Any questions on these articles or these motions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 24. Article 24 is brought forward by the Finance Committee and is a consent agenda item. Under this motion, the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund will be voted at the spring 2022 town meeting would be increased by $43,943, decreasing the funding from the property tax levy in accordance with Chapter 110 of the Acts of 1993 by $82,624, and increasing the funding from the water and sewer receipts by $126,567. The original budget approved at the spring 22 town meeting was based on estimated MWRA assessments and the estimated debt service payments. And these budget adjustments are based on the final actual numbers that we received. Any questions on this article? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Article 25. Article 25 is brought forward by the Finance Committee and is a majority vote. Under this article, the town would reduce the Recreation Department receipts for FY23 by $487,480 and fund the budgetary shortfall by the same amount from retained earnings. So as you may know, the Recreation Department operates as an enterprise fund, which limits the increase of year-to-year estimated revenue in accordance with the Department of Revenue or the DOR regulations. DOR does not approve increases in enterprise fund fees above what was received in the most recent fiscal year close. And so this adjustment is to adjust the funding source by reducing the estimated revenues to a more acceptable level, which is the FY22 revenue total, and increasing the use of retained earnings to fund the budget gap. Any questions on this article? Okay, Article 26. Article 26 is brought forward by the town manager. This item is consent agenda. This is a standard article we see every year, which would appropriate $249,193.08 from the PEG access and cable related funds, $212,108.08 of which would be used for PEG access service programming, monitoring, and cable operators compliance with the franchise agreement to prepare for the renewal of the cable franchise license, including any associated expert in legal services, and $37,085 of which shall be used for capital purposes. Any questions on this article? Okay, Article 27. Article 27 is also brought forward by the town manager. And this article is proposed to be indefinitely postponed. There are no prior year bills to be taken care of under this article. Article 28 is brought forward by the school committee. Under this article, the town would vote to transfer $58,000 from free cash to the SPED Reserve Fund, which was established in spring of 2018 by town meeting in accordance with MGL Chapter 40, Section 13E. So under this article, the Massachusetts Special Education Circuit Breaker Funding Program helps local school districts offset expenditures related to providing legally mandated special education services. In this case, there was $58,000 that was remaining at the end of FY22. And so the plan here is just to transfer that remaining balance, which close to free cash, into that SPED Reserve Fund. Any questions on this article? All right, we're getting close. Article 29. There are a few motions under this one. Article 29 is the personnel board article, and there are 7 motions total. So I'm going to run through the first 3 that are on this page and see if anybody has any questions. I believe Peter Steinmetz from the personnel board may be here, although he may have had to leave. So if he's not here, I'll do my best to try to answer any questions that folks have. So under motion 1, Schedule 10 of the town's compensation plan would be amended, revised, and modified in accordance with the recommendation of the personnel board as set forth in Appendix A, and pursuant to the MOU reached between the select board and the Winchester Firefighters Association. So the town has settled our contract with the firefighters, and so motion 1 would basically memorialize those compensation plans that were included in that settled contract. And then under motion 2, the town would transfer a sum of $120,720 from the FY23 unallocated wage account, which would fund those staffing COLAs in the first year of the contract, which is FY23. Under motion 3, that's the schedule 11 of the town's compensation schedule be amended, revised, and modified in accordance with recommendations of the personnel board set forth in Appendix B. This is the custodians union. So similar to the fire union, the town has settled with the custodians union. And so in this case, we would be amending the town's compensation schedule to come in line with the settled contract amounts. Any questions on motions 1 through 3? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next. So motion 4, similar to the firefighter union, motion 4 is the funds the custodian salary adjustments. So this is the transfer sum of $42,121 from the FY23 unallocated wages, the FY23 personal services budget to fund the cost of those salary adjustments. Motion 5 would amend the town's compensation schedule effective July 1 of 22, recommended by the town manager and the personnel board for proposed classifications. It would amend the Schedule 5 miscellaneous compensation schedule, and Appendix D the classification, the PT compensation schedule. So it would be adjusting positions on those two schedules. And then motion 6, the town would make a newly created position of intern and DPW summer laborer, as well as an existing program manager 1 and program instructor 2 positions would be exempt from future COLA raises. And under motion 7, the town would revert the program instructor 1 and program instructor 2 to the June 1st, 2022 rates that would then become effective December 15th of 2022. So that would not include the COLA adjustments that took effect on July 1st of 22. Those are a little confusing, so I'm happy to take any questions on those. Okay, seeing none. We are at our last article, which is Article 30. This is brought forward by the select board. It requires a majority vote. And this article is to dissolve the Communication Studies Committee, having completed their duties and submitted to report to this fall town meeting. Any questions on that one? Okay. I think we've gotten through all 30 articles. Any final questions? All right. Thank everybody for your time this evening, and look forward to seeing you all in a week at the high school.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you. Night.
Good night.